Anyway, what's up, witches?
What's up?
Yeah, you just caught the tail end of a new. I was complaining because of how light my hair is, thin, like baby hair, that it constantly, if I wear it down, it's always going in my mouth. Shut up. Anyway, tonight, or today, it's not nighttime yet, it's afternoon still, yeah. We finally have all of the, well, not all of.
No, there's no way to have all of.
Yeah, well, again, your main objective for suggesting that we do this series was to present gods and or goddesses, or, excuse me, for those, like Scott Cunningham, goddesses and gods. And I don't mean that in a mean way. Anyway, there are goddesses and there are gods or representations of.
Right.
But I have not. We both have been searching for a while, and I know I procrastinated a little bit, and I'm the one that wanted to do this specific topic. But there are not really. It's a great spirit. That's the
right.
main, of all the beliefs. So, what I found...
Which ones are we talking about today?
Oh, the indigenous. I was going to say the indigenous pantheon, but there isn't, really. There is kind of... What it kind of reminds me, and it goes back older than... what I'm going to use as an example, so I'm not trying to say that one picked it up from the other. But, the Romans and the Greek, they would have house gods.
Right.
There was a town or city god, and, the wider what was venerated by all.
Right.
Okay? So it kind of reminds me in the fact that trying to generalize or put into one... blanket, they had, when the Europeans first came to North America, and I'm not speaking of the Spanish in Mexico.
Okay.
I'm just speaking of the northern part, North America. There were 300 distinct and very different languages based on what the Europeans have documented when they came over. So that means completely different cultures, and varying, not completely different, but varying belief systems.
Right.
So we could be talking about 200 pantheons. I just throwing a number out there. So to try to group them all together as one, it would be an oversimplification.
Yes.
Way oversimplification.
Way oversimplification.
Anyway, before we get much further, they've been sitting out for a while.
Oh, yes.
Because we did the contest recording.
Yes.
Oh, were we not supposed to mention?
Well, no.
Okay. So that's uploaded now, but yeah, I poured a couple shots. And they've been sitting here for a little bit, so they're not chilled anymore.
No.
But to our brothers and sisters of the indigenous population, on behalf of all Europeans, I wish it didn't happen the way it did. Anyway, do you want to go from? Do you have any? Because I just, how I ramble.
Right.
She's just right.
Because but that's one of the many things I love about you.
Yeah.
And before we even started dating and we were friends, I used to love just having conversations with you because you would get so animated and we would go through 20 different
That's the
topics.
Florida New Yorker in me. I mean, I lived in upstate New York, but it's not the same. But like everybody in Florida is from New York. They use their fucking hands.
You
They're
know.
just
But
yeah.
you know, I've always loved having discussions with you. So for my part of the topic, I was doing some research into the Australian Aboriginal
Cool,
mythology.
because I didn't get it. I was pretty much North, Central, and South American. There was so much.
No, well, and I didn't get with the Aborigines. It's just as varying for them as it is with the Native American Indigenous.
Because when the English came over there, bringing their convicts, I mean, there was only, from what the research I did, there was only like one or two, I don't even think they called them tribes, I can't remember, but it was like communities, were so far out, it took decades before they ran across a European. And they were spread out. When they first came over, they just kind of like, everybody had their own opinion on how things should be run, so they just kind of just went all over. There was lots of them.
But one of the main things that I came across was that they have stories about the world beginning in what they call dream time.
Yes.
Which was when the ancestral beings who slept under the ground emerged and created the mountains, the valleys, created the people and the animals,
right,
and established laws by which to live and taught humans how to survive.
Right. And some of their mountains are, I don't remember which one, but there is one mountain or range that is the sleeping goddess. Like, she laid down, and
I've seen pictures of that, and
Yeah.
it really does look like a woman laying down
Right.
sleeping, and it's
yeah. But the thing is, how would you see that if you don't have access? I mean, from the ground, it looks like a mountainous range.
yeah, I don't know,
It's just
but
curious.
you know.
Yeah.
And while these ancestral beings were creating the landscape and the people and teaching us how to survive, they were also establishing correct relationships between the clan groups.
Right. Like I said, they split up when they first
Right.
came over. They split up, but they still there wasn't a whole lot of warfare based on what I found. Like, I mean, there was some, obviously. There's conflict, but not like Europe.
Yeah, not like there is today.
Or
in our-
today. Not well, I meant Europe in that time period.
Right.
But not like today for sure.
But they also established correct relationships between the people and the animals, the people and the land. And then when they were done, they returned to the underground.
There's something that I'm going to talk. There's beliefs where they return to wherever.
Yeah, wherever they came from. They show up, they teach us stuff, and then they leave. And they go back to where they came from.
Right.
In the Aboriginal mythologies, oftentimes they talk about a great flood.
Well, they all talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
Sumerians, the of course the Jewish,
Right.
Christian, Muslims. There's like two other groups other than Sumerian, because that's kind of all encompassing of the whole region.
Right.
There was was it a Shin or Akkadian? There was an Akkadian civilization. But anyway, yeah, they all have.
Yeah, they all have a
South
flood
America, they all have a flood.
Yeah. Did you find that in the Native American ones too? Because they have one.
You know, I did not, because I was, I was going to speak on this in a few minutes, but like when I meditate, when I reach out, if I verbalize it, it is the Great Spirit,
Right.
the universal consciousness, and then my guardians, my spirit guides. I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, that shot. It was a little while ago that I ate. What were we talking about?
How all the myths have a myth about a flood.
Yes. Okay. So sorry. But yeah, they all have. I mean, even the Mayans, the Aztec. Who's in Peru? Was that the Aztec? No.
Well, there was also the Olmec and the Toltec.
Thank you. But they all have a flood story.
Right.
And I think it was the Mayan that had multiple end dates. Like the world has restarted multiple times.
Right.
There was fire, basically what we would call earthquake. There were multiple things that restarted civilization. So.
Right. But they have a myth that talks about a big flood where the Warora, people describe it as an enormous flood that destroyed the previous landscape. So whatever was there, flood came, wiped everything out.
Which makes sense with some of the relics that are left behind. Like in Peru, it's not Machu Picchu, but there's another region, or there's another site in that general region of South America, I'm being very general, where there's literally an arch that's probably 150 tons total, but then all around it are scattered blocks and it looks like a wave came and knocked it all down.
So the belief is that the flood was caused by the ancestral figures that they refer to as the Wangina. Others say it was brought by the great serpent.
Wangina.
The Wangina.
Interesting. All right, because there's something in some of the research I did on the North, Central, and South American side that is
correlates.
Similar. Yeah.
Now the great serpent, and he's also been referred to as the rainbow serpent, the creator, the great creator.
Is that Teotihuacan? I can't. I'm hard. That's why I don't speak Spanish. I took Spanish for 2 years, as well as French. Teotihuacan, or is it Viracocha? Not Viracocha.
Oh, I think
The
I know.
serpent.
Well,
in Mexico,
yeah.
It's the serpent god. He's
Right.
the rainbowed one.
Yeah, I think that's Teotihuacan.
Yeah, okay. So that's not because you're talking about Australian
Right.
Aborigines.
Right.
Interesting correlation, though.
It
or
is.
similarity.
It is. But there's also a group known as the Tiwi who they live on the islands north of Australia, like off the shore. They have a myth that tells of an old woman, Murunkala, who rose up from the ground carrying 3 children. And these 3 children are believed to be the ancestors of all of the inhabitants of the islands. She walked across the landscape, and as she walked, basically water rose up behind her, separating wherever she was from the mainland of Australia.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's basically their myth of how those little islands
Right.
came about. And according to some, the people of the land were created by 2 sisters and a brother. I have no idea how to pronounce this. I'm probably going to mangle it.
It sounds kind of tricky, but I mean, so were the Egyptian and the Romans.
But these sisters and brother were called the Jenkawu.
Okay.
and they also traveled throughout the land. And this cycle of creation, this is the part I find really fascinating, is talked about in a cycle of over 500 songs.
Their songs?
Yes.
Okay.
Those people have a cycle of more than 500 songs where they talk about the creation of these islands.
That's cool. Crazy, but cool.
Yeah.
And I don't mean crazy as in
Like,
psycho.
yeah,
I
not
mean like
loco, but that's
think of
pretty wild.
the 70s and 80s. That's crazy, man.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, that's about as far as I got with
Okay.
it.
Well, that's
But-
a frick. I mean, again, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia are just as diverse, in
Yes.
my opinion. Now, I understand. I'm talking about North America, Central America, and South America, and there's a vast array of cultures and peoples and beliefs and everything.
Right.
But they had and they embraced the Star Brothers.
Yes.
They're much more public about embracing the Star Brothers than what I've
Right.
found with others.
And from what I read, they all have similar history, similar mythologies, but there are varying differences based on where in
Again, like
where you are.
like I had mentioned before about like with every Roman household, there was
Right.
a god for that house, there was
Yeah.
a god for the city or whatever, and then yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty cool. And interesting how they're all very similar. So, I'm just saying. It's just, not that there was, one unified group at any time in our past, that so many of them have similar beliefs, and they all know a flood.
Yes.
So, according to Britannica, and you guys know how I feel about Britannica, I've mentioned it in other posts, but so the Iroquois Longhouse elders speak frequently about the creators and their original instructions for human beings, using the male gender references and attributing this divinity not only with the planning and organizing of creation, of all creation, but qualities of goodness, wisdom, and perfection. Kind of reminiscent of the Christian deity. In contrast, though, and I just want to say, the unfortunately, we know one indigenous person pretty closely. That's the only one that I know that closely, as we know her. Unfortunately, met a lot, and they're all wonderful people, the ones that I've met, and the interactions I've had. But when I asked her to be on the show, I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but maybe at the very beginning of this series, talking about who or what we were going to be discussing, she was moved out of the reservation early in her childhood by her mom, and they were kind of indoctrinated into Catholicism. And when I asked her further about that, she's like, that's kind of even on the res. There are those that are strict adherents, but it was kind of like it was an indoctrination of a people's. So she didn't really have much information. She's like, I would love to be on your guys' show, but I couldn't tell you anything because this is what I know. Which was
Gotcha.
kind of sad.
Yeah.
To me, it was. I felt remorse, even though I personally had nothing to do with that indoctrination.
All right.
Anyway, in contrast to the Iroquois belief systems of an all-knowing, all-loving deity. The Koyukan universe is decentralized. They have a tale of several tales, they call it, or it is called, possibly by Westerners, the Raven cycle. The raven is a bird-human cross breed or entity, a trickster. What does that sound like? There are so many tricksters.
Oh yeah.
Loki, I'll think of right off the bat.
Right.
I know the Roman gods or Greek gods have a trickster.
Yeah, I think they have a couple. The main one I think would probably be Hermes or Mercury.
Because they're quick and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and remember, Hermes was the one who stole Apollo's sheep when he was less than a day old.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, every culture I think has a trickster god.
And I just found it very interesting that not only do they have a trickster god, but this trickster god, the Raven, well, he's basically, even though he's a trickster, he's a cultural hero. His exploits, the narratives of the Raven with the creation of human beings, basically he has the faults of a human, prideful, lustful. Like the stories are pretty sensational.
Okay.
And in the chaos, humans were created. So
Oh.
he's attributed to creating the human race. Now, I'm finding this information from a woman that I went into research. She was, or is, excuse me, not was, Lakota and Dakota descent.
Okay.
So I just found it's really fascinating. There's so much information out there. It's insane. Again, 300 different languages.
Right.
One of the interesting facts that I found is that the indigenous peoples did not separate what we consider the real, I hate when people do that, but what we consider the real world and the spirit world, they're the same.
Right.
Which is that in Christian Judeo beliefs, or even Muslim, because they're all from the same family, there's a gap. You need an intermediary to speak to the God.
Right.
To God. They didn't believe in any of that. It was all like everything has a life force, has a spirit. The mountains, the lakes, the birds, the everything.
Everything of the natural world has a spirit.
So the spiritual and the natural were the same thing, which I found, again, pretty interesting. Again, though, by contrast, the Protestant and Catholic beliefs are quite different.
Right.
You need an intermediary. And by Catholic or Christian Protestant beliefs, there's always an evil entity trying to take you down, as opposed to the decisions that we make
Right.
determine and I mean, nature is nature. It's going to rain or it's not going to rain.
Right. Well, and I'm glad that you came across this information about the natural world and the spiritual world, like, being all the same. Because when I don't know if you've ever read the book, but I had to read the book for one of my herbalism classes. It's called Breeding Sweetgrass.
No, definitely not.
If you're interested in reading the book, it's by a woman named Robin Wall Kimmerer. She is of Native American descent, and she talks about how, like, they do things, but she's raised a little bit more away from that, but she
Right.
still has the teachings. And one of the things that she talks about is how, like, when she would have a question about something,
Yeah.
her mother would tell her, like, go talk to the beaver people, or go sit with the rock people, go talk to the tree people for a little bit. So even though, like, she wasn't actually talking about, like, people as like people
spirit of the
yes, go sit with the trees and listen to them. They'll tell you
what you
need
need
to know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that came up in your research.
Well, I didn't even mention the ant people.
Oh,
There are. Is it Hopi? They
I think so.
talk
The
about.
Anunnaki?
No, the
Or is it-
Anunnaki or the Sumerians. I'm talking about the Hopi indigenous of Western America. Well, basically Western America.
Okay.
I believe it was them. They have a mythos that they were underground for a long time. The ant people came and took them underground.
Right.
To protect them from some catastrophe. I think it was one of the ages, the Ice Age, and then brought them, or it could have been the flood.
When it was over,
When
they
it was over,
emerged from
and
the
they
ground.
emerged from the ground, and then there are some that believe, like, is it the Aztec in Mexico? Mayan.
I think it's I don't know.
Yeah, I love the story, the history, but I could never remember who, because there were 3 different regions, or 3 different groups in 2 regions.
Right.
But anyway, they, I think it was the Aztec, they came down to Mexico, and their home, they talked about, was north of them. So there are some that believe that the Hopis are the ancestors of, or the remnants of, because they didn't go with. Anyway, among various indigenous nations, sorry, screen went blank. They talk about sky people, or star people. I know because I've seen interviews with indigenous aboriginals, what they call them in Australia, and in the United States. They refer to them as star people. A lot of them, whether they're extraterrestrial, some think they're whatever ultra-terrestrial is, but I've even heard the term of multi-dimensional thrown around, or other dimensional. These indigenous groups view these entities or beings as teachers, protectors. They brought knowledge. They don't consider them gods, not even with a lowercase g, like Romans or Greek or any of them. They don't consider them gods at all. They consider them brothers.
Right.
And in some cases, there are some groups that consider them their ancestors,
Yes.
which I find fascinating. The Hopi say, according to the research that I did, the Hopi say that their first home was in the Pleiades. Now, tell me how would they? Now, of course, they didn't have the name of the word for Pleiades at the time.
Right.
But where would that concept come from if it wasn't? I mean, it was all verbal, oral,
Right.
and passed down. But that seems interesting that they say that is their ancestral home.
That is very interesting.
They referred to it as, and I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, so I apologize, but Shehukan.
Okay.
That is the name of the Pleiades system in Hopi. The Cree Nation has legends that their ancestors arrived on Earth as spirits from the stars. There are other stories of spirits coming here and inhabiting the beings that were here and creating evolution, like the Neanderthals.
Okay.
Pretty far out stories, but there are those nonetheless. Traditionally, the Zuni also believe that they were related to a kind of star people. And the Lakota have star knowledge that has been passed down, like we mentioned, through generations, dating back to the ancient ones. I mean, that could be hundreds or thousands of generations. According to that belief system, each Lakota infant is born with a spirit from a star, what they call Wanaga, or Wanagi, or Wanagai. I know it's Wanagi. I know I'm mispronouncing it, and I apologize. Now, when they die, that Wanagai returns to the stars. Their place, again, what we had mentioned earlier, returning to
the
where place of origin.
From.
They travel through the stars. They return to the stars, and they travel through what we call the Big Dipper in the sky. Go through it. And it's called the Trail of Spirits, what we call the Milky Way.
Ooh, I
yes,
like that.
It's pretty fascinating shit. I mean, and that's why I'm really, and when I meditate, I call out I'm really drawn to the native, just, I think maybe a little bit more than the Irish, even though in this lineage of Irish descent. Anyway, much of the information that I received or found and found fascinating was from, I didn't put her name there, excuse me, Ruth H. Burns. I really feel I need to give credit to her because I was having a difficult time finding validation of the things I already knew. Mm-hmm. Because it's not, I mean, Britannica had very little, which,
right.
Again, you know my opinion of that. Wikipedia has a lot, but
who's to say it's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it's anyway.
Have you ever been to the Heard Museum?
Oh yeah, but it's been a long time.
We should go there sometime.
I'm down. I thought about, actually, what's odd is about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was thinking, we haven't done really, I mean, because life is life. We haven't done something in a while. We should probably go to a museum. Anyway, so I found that information. She is what is referred to, and I'm going to mispronounce this, I know, Ositi or Ositi Sakowin, which basically translate into a Dakota and Lakota woman. So I just wanted to give a shout out because it was really awesome to find, not just on Ancient Aliens. I love the show. They embellish a lot and exaggerate and make assumptions but something other than that.
Right.
It was nice to find some information that actually speaks of what they believe.
Right.
So anyway, shout out to you. And anyway, that is our indigenous peoples.
Yes.
Sorry, not really. I mean, if there are gods or goddesses that you guys know of, if you're an indigenous person, if you want to send us any info, love it. We'll put it on air.
Yeah, don't forget with our with the audio podcast, we now have that button where you can text us.
Oh yes.
It actually says text the show or something like that.
Good way of, that's a good cutting me off from, yeah. Go ahead.
So, yeah, if you have any information about either the Australian Aboriginals, spirits, creators, or the Native American creator spirits, what have you, we'd love to read it and share it with the rest of our with the listeners.
I mean, we did what's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Not complete like the whole time doing research, but we did do our due diligence, and there is so much information.
Yes.
I've said that about all of them, though. Actually, I
Yeah.
think this one though is like
This one
to the-
really was
to
though, to
squared.
the nth degree,
Yeah,
because every area you go to, every clan was different, every tribe was different, the regions were different. So
some of the events were the same, like the flood,
yes,
but and one ultimate great spirit.
right.
But other than that, they
But
were
other than
pretty
that,
different.
yeah, very different. But I look forward to reading more.
So do I. So what are we doing next?
Ooh, we have. Well, we're saving the
Sumerian for last.
Sumerian for last.
Because that's going to be that might be a two-parter.
The Hindu is going to be right before that. I think we have the Asian, the Japanese.
Ooh,
next.
are we going to just? Are we going to split it up? We going to because Japanese have their own, even though they're kind of similar to Chinese. And then Taiwan. I mean, are we just going to do one?
Oh.
Yeah. Like.
I think we'll just have to figure that out after we do our research.
Okay.
But
That's the next one.
The Asian pantheon is next. The yeah.
Okay. I think we could probably do we'll do.
That might have to be a two-parter though.
Yeah, that might also have to be a two-parter, but because even if we do just focus on the Chinese, and then branch. So this is similar to kind of like we did with, was it the Roman or Greek?
The Greek and Roman, yeah.
Similar to this of the Japanese pantheon. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
We
That
might
one
have to do
that one
that.
might have to be a two-parter, but I think.
Sorry, we're brainstorming at the same time.
But I think that would be our next one.
Okay. Oof. We should set a time limit. We'll discuss this after. Love you guys.
Peace out, witches.
Peace.